Well, hello there, YouTube friends. Short talk in the trailer with the old guy. It's Tuesday in the afternoon. Just got home from work a little while ago. I had to do a little grocery shopping on the way in. I I was shocked. I was over at the Albertsons. There was I want to say it was like a liter and a half or something. It was more than a quart of grapefruit juice in a bottle. It was like $11. I went, $11? Wow! Thanks, Biden. You're doing a great job. Pumping all this junk money into the system. There's nothing to back it. And just by putting money in circulation, you don't create wealth. What you do is actually destroy wealth, because the amount of riches, we'll call it oil or timber or wheat or soybeans or whatever actual has value, there's not more of that. There's just more money circulating around to represent it. That means it takes more money per unit to, it's basically grand theft on an incredible scale. And what it's designed for, the reason they do inflation is because, well, frankly, they're idiots. The reason they do inflation is because they're crooked. And it's like, well, I'm going to borrow $100 from you today, okay? All right. Tomorrow I'll pay you the $100. However, in the meantime, the dollar itself has shrunken in value. So you say, well, wait a minute. Actually, tomorrow you'll have to pay me back 105, and that's where interest rates come from, because they know they're going to build inflation in, and that's why you have to pay back more than you borrow. Basically, it's theft. And so what we're doing here with this, and every country that's on the way down does it. You know, some of the cases of inflation have just been fantastic. I mean, in terms of, you know, I think it was Zimbabwe years ago. I can't remember what it was, but it was like they started circulating, instead of like $1 bills in Zimbabwe money, it was like they were circulating $1 million bills, and you could go get maybe a jug of milk with it or something. And so anyway, that was my Albertsons experience. I got a request today from a young lady named Anna Rose. Hello, Anna Rose. Good to see you. Actually, I don't see you, but you sort of see me in a way. I thought about it, and her request was, hey, Mike, how about you give us your version of your Christian testimony? And I thought to myself, actually, I thought that was a good idea. How come I didn't think of that? Oh, by the way, here's the product for the day. Kilt Lifter. If this beer doesn't do it for you, well, then there's something wrong with you. I just made a new advertising slogan for them. So we're waiting for the big royalty checks to start rolling in any day. Yeah, I have evidence that 3 people saw this ad. But at any rate, Anna Rose, I appreciate it, and I thank you for the idea. I think it's very clever. Now, before we go any further, I want to qualify things, because I always do that. Have you noticed? I got to thinking about it this morning after I read her comment, and I thought, there. Think about it, Mike. Think. And I thought, have I ever done this before? And I thought, well, the way that my testimony ordinarily comes out, it comes out in bits and pieces, and it's always in terms of a conversational thing, or let's say a small group of people is discussing topics, and it becomes incumbent upon you to bring in part of your conversion experience. And so nobody ever really hears the whole thing. And I got to thinking about it, and I thought, do I even know the whole thing? And so I thought, well, I'm just going to kind of peruse my mind today, kind of do a little refreshing, and try to... And so today, you won't believe this. Anna Rose, look at this. I actually have a little bit of an outline in case I get off track, because we know that I do that, don't you? I thought, what are the odds of me forgetting halfway through this thing, what I'm talking about, and start, waxing eloquent about plumbing code theory or what. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to point this out to you. If you have any questions, no, I don't use fingernail polish. That stuff you see on my hands is usually, it's evidence that I've been working in a ditch there's a couple of chemicals. They're real strong chemicals. One's called purple primer. The other's a gray glue. It's for PVC, for joining, hub and spigot together. Boom, boom. Well, I don't use gloves when I work. Whenever I use gloves, I like lose my touch, and I can't seem to get anything just right. And so I work barehanded, and it shows up. And so anyway, someday you'll see my hands a different color, not purple. They'll be more like a dark brown, more like into the palms. And I've actually had people physically retreat from me, extend my hand. It's a Sunday morning. I've been in the shower a couple of times since Friday, and I've used like lava soap and Ajax and stuff, and I can't get the stain out of my skin. That black iron stains deep. And I'll stick out my head. Hey, how you doing? People just whoa. Physically, they don't want to touch that thing. Could be toxic. It's like, don't worry about it. I eat off that thing all the time. See, I'm still healthy. But at any rate, thank you, Anna Rose. So I'm going to try to stay on topic. That'll be a first. And how did I get here as a Christian? Well, that's a long story. I've been a Christian. I believe it was the winter of 1977 when the Lord came kind of barging into my life. I grew up in a church in Albuquerque. It was a Disciples of Christ church. If you know anything about that denomination, you know it's pretty darn sketchy. In other words, a gang of liberals. I mean, even in the early 60s, they had women pastors and stuff, and if that offends you, I'm sorry. But in my ancient and debilitated self now, anytime I know that there's a woman going to be speaking up front as the preacher, I just walk out. So let's say I'm narrow-minded, but I grew up around that stuff, and I never knew anything about it. It never occurred to me that there would be anything weird about women being preachers. But by 1966, by then I was 8 years old. I mean, I was born in '58, and I remember there was a lot of crazy stuff going on in the '60s. A lot of riots. Vietnam was going on, and then there was this other thing, this counterculture thing called the Hip Revolution. Then there was yet this other thing going on, civil rights movement, having to do mostly with black folks, and a lot of it had to do with either the South or big metro areas up north like Detroit, Chicago, big Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, D.C. And so if it was the North, it was a lot of big metro areas. And so there was a lot of riots. There was videotapes of, police with their great big German Shepherds. And then they had the fire department out there with fire hoses trying to push people back with fire hoses and batons and dogs. I mean, it was just, it was pretty brutal. And so I was a little kid looking at all this stuff thinking, man, the world's unhinged. They want me to grow up here? Really? Why was I brought here? This is nuts. But at any rate, by the time I was probably 10, I decided that I wanted nothing to do with God. Now, I never in my mind, and I've never in my life doubted God's existence. And it's like this in the Bible. The devils have no doubt of God's existence. So faith means a little bit more than being aware that he exists. I was aware that he exists. I don't know a day when I didn't know that. But I do know that for the vast majority of my life up until that day when he reached in and did something to me, I basically just hated his guts. I wanted nothing to do with him. He seemed to me like some kind of nice guy pansy, It was kind of like, when your enemy slaps you on the right cheek, turning to him the left. I thought, no, man, that ain't how you handle that. When the enemy slaps you in the right cheek, you take a sawed-off shotgun and blow his kneecap off. He'll never do that again. Seemed reasonable to me. And I didn't understand, and all this stuff about, the people used to tell me, I don't know how many times when I was a kid, Jesus loves you. And a lot of this came out of this same disciples church. And the disciples are basically Campbellites, who are a bunch of heretic Presbyterians is what they are. So the Campbellites split up into three groups. There's the disciples, that's the kind of the high church. They still wear robes and have pipe organs and stuff. The Christian church is kind of middle of the road evangelical. And then the Church of Christ, it depends upon the Church of Christ you're actually in, but some of them don't even use like a piano or a banjo or anything. No instruments allowed. So that's more of the kind of the fundamentalist end. Then there's a middle of the road kind of evangelical, and I was in the left wing kind of woke version of, except no one said the word woke back then. And I had no idea that I was in a church like that. I just thought all churches were like that, and I thought, why would anyone in their right mind want to have anything to do with this stupid hokum? Get out of my face. And it's just like, the answer lays elsewhere. All you've told me is the answer is somewhere other than what you can contribute. So the reason I hated God was, it's basically the problem of evil, is that, hey, look, dude, you're supposed to be like all powerful and supremely good. Look around, dude. Explain to me what I'm seeing. If you're in charge of this, you suck at what you do. That's all I got to say, man. And it's sad, isn't it sad, that an 8-year-old has to be the one to point this out to you? What's wrong with you, man? That was kind of my attitude. So let's say I was a little hostile. And I pretty much settled into that. By the time I was 11 or so, or 12, I used my dazzling charisma and winning ways with women. Smile, Mike, smile. Oh, sorry. And to basically schmooze my mom into allowing us to stay home. And like, gosh, Mom, I really don't want to go. Well, why not? Would you really like to know? No, I never did tell her why I didn't want to go. I never really did tell her. Because, frankly, I hate God's guts. I told her, this stuff's just not interesting to me. And see, the thing was, I don't think my dad was actually ever a believer. My dad was the guy who was running interference for me because I knew how to run this kind of gambit. I knew Mom and Dad weren't on the same page, so I knew how to work them apart. Pretty smart kid. And Dad came to me, well, my mom's name was Dorothy. Well, Dorothy, if the boys don't really want to go, I mean, is it going to do them any good in the long run? I mean, actually, so in other words, he'd been forced to go to church when he was a boy, so now he was coming to my rescue, see? So I thought I was a pretty smart kid. In fact, I was just convinced I was smart, but not so smart, really, as all that. If it took discipline, if it took hard work, if it took mastering a subject, like, say, calculus or something, you got the wrong guy. I'm Mr. Scatterbrain, but I'm quick on my scatterbrains. I may be erroneous, but I do it swiftly. And so, at any rate, getting back to the story, I've never done a full tilt Christian testimony in one run, and so I'm pretty sure I'm going to leave something out. So, Anna Rose, I even took notes. So here's the keys. Here's the keys of how I got here. Point one says, I hated the guy. And frankly, I thought I was right. What else would I think? I mean, nobody goes around thinking the opinions in my mind I know to be deeply flawed and are untrue. No, people believe what they believe because they think it's right. Duh. And so by the time I was in high school, I got a job at a Pizza Hut working as a busboy. I lied about my age. I told him I was 16, but I was really only a month and a half short of it. And so I just moved my birthday up 2 months. Poof, I'm 16. And so I was in there working, and I eventually met this guy. He was an older guy, and he was in his late 20s. And this dude was kind of a strange dude, but he was a very intelligent dude. And he and I had a lot in common in terms of temperament and personality. We became friends. Well, we started smoking astonishing amounts of reefer and stuff together, and he was involved in the occult, in witchcraft, and a couple of other items. He was very interested in astrology, Vedic astrology, and he had a whole slug of issues going on, but very interesting cat to talk to when you're 17 years old and you're trying to figure out what the world's all about. This guy seemed like a source to me. And anyway, the short version is, I started getting mixed up reading occult type literature. Now, I never got into any occult practice in terms of the rituals and all that stuff. No, what I was interested in was the theoretical, abstracted, philosophical angle of what the occult had to say for its truth affirmations. What do you guys say is the real deal? You do disagree with the church. I have that much in common with you. What do you say is the real deal? And I became, over time, basically just disappointed. The experts, when you begin to listen to the experts inside occult theory, they all have one thing in common. And if you'll read them, you'll find it in there somewhere. Trust me. It sounds a little bit like this. Well, you may have experimented with some of this stuff, and you may have understood some of this stuff in the past, but if you're following anyone else's teaching than mine, Mr. Occult Master or Mrs., then you don't know the real story. I've got the inside answer, which answers all the difficulties which these other failed theories can't. And this includes the church, you see. So the thing they all have in common is they wear this big button on there that says, "Trust me," and nobody else. It's funny that all you guys are wearing the same button. And so I began to think, these guys, they're no better than the others. And so, but I was getting involved in terms of experimental. I was up in Alaska, and I used to do this weird experiment. Please don't try this. I think what I was doing was scrying. S-C-R-Y, scrying. I think I was scrying, but I'm not sure. What I used to do is I'd go in, there was a gang bathroom on the 3rd floor for the enlisted troops, you know. So there's like 8 lavatories in a row, there's 9 toilets in a row, there's a gang shower over there, there's a couple of urinals over here. Big bathroom, big gang bath. So I was in there by myself, and I'd be looking just deep into the mirror, just like this. Looking only into my eyes. That's all I would look, into the eyes only. And after a while, the face began to change. It began to kind of like bubble up and get like distorted. The guy in the Fantastic Four, the guy named The Thing, he was like, he looked kind of like a rock face in a way, but he had tremendous power. I don't know if you need to go look at Fantastic Four. Just go watch that movie. But the point is that my face itself, all that was left after a while was the only thing I could see was the eyes, and all around it was this, it looked like lava or craggy, rocky, extruded, irregular lava or something. I mean, it's like, boy, that's one ugly son of a gun. Oh, that's me. And I was monkeying around with stuff like that, and I was monkeying around with my eyes a lot. I used to be able to get into a thing where I could essentially, I don't know how to describe it, but it's a little bit like seeing only through part of your eyes, but still looking up. And so your eyelids are almost closed, but you're looking up. Excuse me. And I used to be able to see things like faces and stuff would begin to appear in like mental images, a little bit like daydreaming. That's about as far as I got carried into it, and that stuff freaked me out right there, to be honest with you. So I was kind of running out of answers. I was just thinking, this is just dumb. So, I was drinking a lot at that time. I used to have a lot of dreams, real vivid dreams. Now, I still dream to this day, but nothing like what I was doing back then. And I don't know why I'm sneezing all of a sudden. Ugh, boy. So I used to have some dreams while I was up in Alaska there, and they were, I could interpret them when I woke up. One of them, as an example, I'll give you an example. So this is my testimony. Why am I sneezing? That's nothing to sneeze at, young man. Old man either. Anyway, the point being, one of them was, if you can imagine hovering in a helicopter over a sailcraft, a sailboat that had tipped over sideways in the water. So you're, say, 100 feet above it in a helicopter. You're looking down at a boat. Now the sail and the, whatever you call it, that stick in the air, the boom or whatever it's called, everything's laid over sideways. The boat is partially submerged and slowly sinking. And what's happening is, of course, it's not acting like a sailboat anymore. It's just being carried along by the tide. I didn't see anybody in it. Nobody was waving for help or anything. It was just a sailboat tipped over, carried along by the tide. I woke up, like, whoa, what was that about? It's like, whoa, I knew that's me. That's me. I'm the one going nowhere. I remember a dream where I had actually several of these. These were very disturbing dreams, where I'm reading a text, and I'm really enjoying reading it for a couple of reasons, because I can tell whoever wrote this thinks like I do. And besides that, it has a kind of a gnarly, mean edge to it. And like the title of the book might be called How to Drive a Wedge Between True Brothers. How to Create Distrust in a Community. And I'm reading along, and suddenly I realized, holy mackerel, this book was written in longhand, and that's my handwriting. Wake up and kind of go, oh, what was that about? And I'm thinking, oh, great. Now I'm writing books inspired by what? The enemy. And I remember another dream and another dream. But the point is that they were all disturbing. But something changed one night. I was in a dream. And this is how I came to Jesus. Somehow or another. Now, if you've ever watched the old Lassie TV show, you know that Timmy, that knucklehead, that kid's always falling into wells. It says, stay out. This means you, Timmy. Guess what? He's going to fall in there. There's an abandoned coal mine. Stay out. This means you, Timmy. There's Timmy's bike right by the coal thing. Guess where he went? Right down the hole. And so the kid would always emerge. He got a broken arm this week or whatever. And Lassie, the dog, had way more sense than anyone in the family. But the idea of falling into a hole. So I was in a crevasse. It was a very narrow thing. And I was pinned in there a little bit like this. There's rock here and rock behind me. And I could barely look up and see a little bit of light. And I'm just absolutely pinned. My arms won't move. I'm realizing then in the dream that someone's above me. Someone's up there. And a rope begins to lower. And it's got a loop on the end. So all I got to do, if you can imagine it, is just reach out, stick my arm through there, get the loop under my arm like that, and they'll lift me right up. I couldn't move my arm. It was like right in front of my face, and I couldn't get into it. And I was so frustrated. It was like, this is so close to me, and I can't do it. And in that dream, I called out, I think verbally. Now, I might have said it in my, talking in my sleep. I don't know. But I yelled, God, help me now! And it's like a little bit, if you've ever dived into a pool off a high board, and you go way deep, and then you roll. Now you're swimming vertically up. In fact, you can outrace your own bubbles if you're careful. And I used to like swimming vertically back up to the surface. It was a little bit like that, swimming vertically up to the surface, this wake up, after I called out. And I kind of burst out, poosh! I was like, oh! And I was in my bed and I thought, whoa, what happened? Where am I? And it was like, oh. I thought, God, what a dream. And then all of a sudden, 3, 2, 1. It's like someone reached in with their hand, I swear, right in here in my solar plexus. Ugh, right here. Gotcha! By the heart. It was like, ugh! And I thought, I'm losing my mind. And what it felt like was someone had turned a huge switch in there or something, and just a valve turned or something. I don't know. Someone reached in and went, yeah, gotcha. And it was like, I was depressed after that. I thought, oh great, now I've lost my mind. I wasn't associating with Christians. I couldn't stand Christians. I didn't even like being around them. And the Bible, I didn't read that stuff. Why was I interested in that? I tried to read the Bible before, but it always sounded like a bunch of stories about a bunch of dead Jewish guys. It was like, so? Every people has its history. Would you like me to learn every people's history just 'cause? No, this one's different. It's like, yeah, let me know. See you. So at any rate, that dream changed my life. But there was a couple of dreams that I want you to also hear about, because these came in before that one crucial dream. In the dream, I'm out dribbling basketball in the backyard where I grew up. We had a basketball pole in the backyard. a hoop. And all of a sudden, I start feeling heavy. And pretty soon, I'm down to my knees. Suddenly I weigh 500 pounds or something. And then, right on my face. Like you're just laying face down. And I'm pushing like this against the ground with everything I've got to try to push myself back up. And it's like my own strength was being used against me to guarantee that I would never get up. And but up behind me in the dream was my dad, my human dad, looking through the window. Now he wasn't trying to help me, just watch him. And I would look over my shoulder. I could just barely see him up there. And I would say, and it's funny too, because I would say something like, Father? Question, like, is that you, Father? And all of a sudden, forget about getting up. I was flying 15 feet off the deck, looking down on it and kind of going, well, wow. And then I would wake up. The weird part of that was I never, ever called my dad Father. I always called him Dad or Pops. I used to call him Pop sometimes. And, if I was kidding around and having a good time, we might say Daddy-O or something like that. But he was always either Dad. I never called him Father, and I never called my mother Mother. She was always Mom. And so at any rate, I had these dreams where I was flying. I had one similar to that in a congregation. In fact, in the Monte Vista sanctuary, in the dream, I was, again, sucked down to the floor right in the main aisle, and I could not move. And then I heard behind me, up in the rafters, Michael. And it was like, Father? And all of a sudden, whew, again, I'm 16 feet off the floor looking down, kind of floating and stuff, and then wake up. And so he did something in my life, and I don't know exactly what it was, but we call it regeneration. He granted me a life that I don't deserve, and frankly, I never even really asked for. I didn't even know that it existed, if you want to know the truth. I had no idea what the Christians were talking about. I thought what they were saying was, Jesus came down here to tell you a very important message. Ready? Try harder to be a nicer guy. Try to be more loving occasionally, if you can, summon it up. I was thinking, these guys specialize in what, irrelevance or what? And so at any rate, the dreams, I think, was the main angle. And the sailboat and the book, How to Divide Brethren, that was a big one. I had a dream also in there, and this one reoccurred a couple of times. In the dream now, I'm looking in a mirror at my own face, except my nose is wrong. It's all bulbous. It's big. Got a lot of veins and stuff. Signs of a chronic, long-time drinker, big time. And in the dream, I'm rooting through a box. It's a little, like a cigar box, a small thing. And in there's like these bogus medals. When you're in the military, you can hang these little doodads on your uniform if you care to. Well, this shows that I showed up for work on time. This says that I didn't, kill anybody except the people I was supposed to, or whatever. And these little medals and stuff are supposed to mean something to you. Honestly, I looked at that stuff and thought, keep it. But in the dream, I was rooting through these medals. I'm going to change the light here. There seems to be a fantastic amount of glare. The sunshine is trying to roar through my window. Let's see. That's not too shabby. Only moderately shabby. Pretty good. So at any rate, the dreams, I think, were the key thing. And so Anna Rose, I don't know other than how he did that. I don't know what he did other than to say, still going to get this right eventually. No, you're not. I don't know what he did, but I know that I was changed. Almost immediately, within the next few days. Now, I didn't tell anybody about the dream. I didn't go forward at a church and give my life to Jesus or anything like that. I used to go occasionally to the chapel, the base chapel services, but if you wanted to go into town to Fairbanks for a church service, that was 26 miles one way at least. And so I wasn't interested in going to church anyway. But the point is that with all of these things that were happening to me, I guess you call them spiritual or dream image stuff, I knew something happened. And so I thought to myself, well, I did call to God. I do believe there is a God. So maybe I should go look at what the Bible really has to say. I mean, have I really ever tried to actually read the thing? And it was a very weird experience for me. Now, other Christians have said similar things, so it's not weird in that sense. It was just weird to me personally. Suddenly, the thing started to make sense. What? I'd read this thing off and on for years and years, and I was familiar with a lot of the stories. I grew up hearing Bible stories when I was a little kid. I heard, I don't know how many sermons, and thank goodness I don't remember any of them. But the point is that suddenly the text began to actually, my word is file. It began to file, and I went, oh, that's what you're talking about? And I began to read a guy named C.S. Lewis, and he's an excellent author, very intellectual kind of guy, but he writes in a kind of a common man style. He has a very readable style. Interesting dude, excellent author. Well, anyway, it was one of his books, and I don't actually recall which one, but it might have been God in the Dock. You can go look it up, get a good. It's a pretty decent. It's a series of essays, is what it is. And another one of his was Mere Christianity, which that really sparked a fire in me as well. But when I understood what Lewis was actually saying, I was outraged. I was sitting there thinking, now, wait a minute. You are telling me that this carpenter, this nail beater in ancient Palestine is the dude that invented dirt? The guy, the mighty maker, God himself? Really? That's a rather large claim, don't you think? I mean, what else you got up your sleeve here? And I thought, well, that thing's got to either be true or false. I mean, there's no way you can come down in the middle on that. And that was kind of his point, is that you can either treat Jesus as a liar, a complete, absolute, full tilt liar, or a lunatic on the level of someone who thinks that he's the same thing as a poached egg or something. I can't remember what his example was. Or the third answer is, what he's saying is true. I came to the point where I began to bargain with God after that. And I said, look here. I see now, okay, maybe I'm awake and maybe I'm not, but I can see now that I don't know how many denominations there are. I don't even care. And I'm not going to go do an exhaustive study to find out how they each differ from each other and all that stuff. No, you got the wrong gringo. I said, looky here. This claim is so outrageous. This claim is so one of a kind, absolutely unique in all of human history, that if it's false, if this is a lie, then I'm going to devote the rest of my life to burning down churches. Churches that believe this stuff. It's outrageous unless it's true. And that changes everything. So I said, then I'm not going to listen to any of your theological experts. I'm not going to listen to, radio preachers, or I'm not going to listen to, people who publish tracts. I'm going to listen to either A, Jesus Christ himself, his apostles, or the prophets that came before him, otherwise the writers of Scripture, the holy writers. Those are the only people I'm going to listen to. And if I can't deduce out of that information what Lewis is affirming, I'm going to go buy me some matches. I'm going to perfect the art of Molotov cocktails. You know what I mean? Because that is just wrong. I might have made a pretty decent Muslim at one point. I don't know. I was kind of violence prone as a boy. But, I used to say things like this. I really don't understand why people are racist. I mean, I don't get it. Because what they're saying is they're saying they only hate one kind of people. Let's be wide open. Let's be universal and hate everybody. I hated everybody. I wasn't picky, and I wasn't too crazy about this gringo either. I hated my own guts, and God and him was like, get out of here. And he changed me. He really did. So when the Bible started making sense to me, I was shocked. And soon enough, it didn't take that long when I began to realize out of the text itself, Lewis was doing a good summary. Lewis was serving a true witness. And I thought, boy, have I been on the wrong track all my life. Ooh-boo, boo-boo. So anyway, Anna Rose, that takes me up to probably 2 years afterwards. I finally did start going to church. They shifted my base. I went from Eielson Air Force, which is 25 miles out of Fairbanks, right smack in the middle of Alaska, down to Warner Robins, Georgia, kind of right in the middle of the Bible Belt. So I got mixed up. I think it was called Second Baptist Church in Warner Robins. There was a guy named, I wish I could remember his last name, but his first name was so cool. Rastus, R-A-S-T-U-S. Old Rastus. He was about my age now when he was preaching. He was in his 60s, and I used to love listening to Rastus. But anyway, started getting mixed up with that church, and then I started doing a lot of reading and decided I really wasn't a Baptist after all. And so I started reading the apostles, of course. And then I thought, well, where's the trail go after that? And I stumbled across, because I think someone led me to it, St. Augustine. I read City of God. That was a long book, but interesting writing. And Augustine was a big theological guy, and both Roman Catholics and the Protestants, and I don't know, maybe the Orthodox even too, maybe to some degree, But anyway, for sure, Roman Catholic and Protestants both agree that Augustine is kind of one of their linchpin guys in terms of how they, and his big idea was called the City of God. The City of God premise was basically this, that you have a dual growth perspective. In other words, as things get worse, as the dark gets darker, the light grows lighter. You have two cities growing together at the same time. Now, in the Bible verse, it sounded like you have plants that the master planted and weeds that an enemy planted in the same field. They're both growing together at the same time, but there shall be a division among them at the end. Well, Augustine was a big mover and shaker, and I thought, well, where's the trail lead after that? And it led really, in my mind, to Martin Luther. If you can get a good, honest, modern translation of Bondage of the Will, Martin Luther may be my single favorite author of all time. That guy, I mean, it's like a bull in a china shop, man. This guy, just get out of my way. He clears it out. He just bowls over the opposition, and he's so biblical, and he's just fun to read. I just love that guy. But there was another guy at the same time, Calvin, and that's where I ended up. Calvin versus Luther. Well, at that time, they weren't versus. In a way, they were kind of on the same side because both were in trouble with Rome. I mean, Rome was sending out agents to persecute these people and kill them. When you get mixed up in these Protestant heresies back in those days, it could mean your head, or you might be burned alive. And so the Calvinists and the Lutherans were not at war with each other, but they didn't really agree with each other even then that much. Today, it's still the same thing. Then this followed through later, and I decided, because I started reading the writings of a young John Calvin. I loved young John Calvin. Now, the old John Calvin, his big book is called The Institution of the Christian Religion. Or The Institutes, I think it's called. Institutes of the Christian Religion. That's right. Thing's 2 volumes, I don't know, probably 1,400 pages. And I mean, it's an okay read, but boy, who wants to read 1,400 pages of theology? I mean, come on. But at any rate, I did read the thing. It took me forever. But the young John Calvin, his book was called The Institution of the Christian Religion, and it was only 240 pages long. It was much more digestible, and it had the same basic ideas. But this is young John at, say, 25 or 26 versus old John at maybe in his 50s or something. I don't know how old the guy even lived to be. And so as he grew and matured and stuff, he kind of filled in and enhanced and fully drew out the meaning of the text, which he just kind of raced by as a young man. That book kind of changed my life too, but I think at the bottom of it, my Christian testimony is that we say, we want people to become Christians. We really do, and I know I do. I ran into a young lady the other day in the park. I mean, this woman's a lunatic, and if she doesn't find Jesus, she has no hope. Not really. That hokum she's got in her head ain't gonna fly with the master at all. But the thing is how does that happen? And yes, you can talk to them. Yes, you can speak scripture words to them. Yes, you can pray for them. Yes, you can pray with them. But I think what happened in my life was that I know my sisters who were Christians at that time, my older sisters, they were praying for me. I know they were. And I think there might have been others as well. And God kind of came and found me in a place where he knew I would have no choice but to pay attention. Because I kind of specialize in, I'm just going to blow you off, see you later, yeah, check off, see you. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing that, most of my life. One of my favorite phrases to dismiss people with that I disagree with, I'll write a comment, in YouTube, someone has some egregious nonsense, and I won't fight with them. I'll just say, hey, have a nice hallucination. I'm just assuming you're insane. And so in terms of this, Anna Rose, I think that would kind of bring me up to the more or less the current day. After I got out of the military, I kept reading more, and I ran across a guy named Cornelius Van Til. Now, the problem with Van Til is he speaks his own private language. But once you learn to speak his language, that boy, I think he makes some really powerful and clear-headed biblical applications, which the church needs to hear. This guy was writing like 100 years ago, early part of the 20th century. and into the mid part of the 20th. I think he died in the 1960s, I believe, what you'd call old age. So he was in his prime in like World War I, that kind of stuff. And Van Til had a very interesting idea. And basically, I've tried to adopt my life this way as much as I can. And I'm probably going to mess it up, but it has to do with what's called presuppositionalism. And what presuppositionalism means is when you say something, there are presuppositions behind it which you use whereby to infer that you are speaking true words. You presuppose either the existence or the non-existence of something called golf balls when you just say, we're going to go play golf. You presuppose that they do exist, and in fact, you're right. But what if you suppose the opposite? Would you ever go play golf? Of course not, because golf balls don't exist in your mind. But the point is that we're not as if we were just a blank slate that we fill in information. No, we've got a definite agenda. We've got an axe to grind. When we were born crooked. We were born liars. One of the first things that little kids learn how to do is tell lies. And I'm sure I was one of them too. But the point is that his presuppositionalism is that it sounds a little bit like this. No, I'm not going to prove to you that God exists. No, I refuse. Because by virtue of you asking me to prove it, you're asking me to join you in your presupposition, which says God probably does not exist and there's no evidence that can be produced that I would accept in any case. That's what you're presupposing. You're presupposing that he has to prove himself. I presuppose as a believer, he has proven himself more than once and in huge capital letters with, lightning and thunder to help you understand. He has made himself clear. He has declared his covenant in earth. And the reason you doubt it is because you're corrupted at the heart. You hate him and you will not say so. And now you want to play footsie? We're going to play logic games? And Van Til just shut him down. It's like, no, we're not going to have a dispute about whether the God of the Bible may or may not exist. I'm going to begin my side of the discussion with, we know already very well that he does, and the problem is that we can't face it because we're corrupt. I like that attitude because it's honest. Well, very few people have latched on to Van Til because he's a Dutchman by birth, and by golly, when this guy starts writing sentences in English, it's just like, oh, please stop. I mean, just go learn English, will you? But once you learn Van Tilian, he has his own private language. He has it's a very refreshing outlook, and I've tried to model my adult Christian life on Cornelius Van Til's basic idea. And what it involves is that if you have a human grasp or human understanding, you're going to have a polarity trap, A or B, left or right, do or don't, in or out. You only have options A and B. And when you get into those kind of ping pong games, then if you throw something like God in there, does or does not, does or does not, is or is not, and Van Til is essentially saying that the is not option is not legal for you to take as a human being. You are not free as a human to doubt your maker because you already know that you exist and you know that you cannot explain your existence. You are defying God every day. And until you can own up to it, until you can say, well, my thinking really is built upon the idea that, God needs proof to prove that he is, but I already know that I don't need any proof that I exist. See, I'm actually in a stronger position than him. That's insane. That's technically insane. And so he was pointing out that kind of flaw in the thinking of people, and in terms of how the gospel is presented. I mean, how do you make the appeal to the unbeliever? Because in terms of the unbeliever, his eyes are closed, he's blind. His ears are deaf, he can't hear. His heart is dead to the Lord. He will not respond. And until God the Almighty is pleased to awaken that soul supernaturally by the power of the Spirit through the use of the Word, the person can't actually ever really respond the way that a Christian is supposed to by saying, yes, I do trust you, Jesus. Yes, I do give you my life. Yes, I do surrender my time, my ability, my everything, my reputation, my health, whatever I have that I could surrender, I offer to you as a thanksgiving offering. And thanks for letting me live down here. It's very interesting. But in other words, by the time I was in my early 20s, I'd shifted pretty much to Van Tillian a view, and which really kind of put me apart. I became a very lonely kind of person because almost nobody understands or likes the guy. He's a lot like Calvin. In that, if you think about John Calvin, what's his basic problem? That guy needs a press agent. If anybody at all knows about John Calvin, they almost uniformly hate the guy. Unless you happen to be a Calvinist like me, which is like, actually, he's a pretty good guy. Same with Van Til. He inspires a lot of enemies, and he inspires a lot of distrust and stuff, because he's talking essentially 2 generations ahead of where his readers were at the time. He was so far ahead of the crowd that they couldn't really understand what the guy was about. We can understand it now somewhat with this postmodern mumbo jumbo, where the lefties try to control the narrative through hijacking language. The transphobic thing and all that. The LGBTQ, however many letters there are this week, all that political stuff, you can see it now. The language is being used as a weapon. And when language is weaponized, that means that things like this happen. Well, the Americans who are white are actually oppressors and have done only harm to other people. All of history, they really need to be banned from society. So, all of a sudden, we've already settled that it's okay to be racist as long as you're racist against white people. This is the way the modern mind, so to speak, works. So, in other words, they hijack the language, and then they try to use this distorted viewpoint to leverage their position so that they gain more traction and get more money and gain more, fame and notoriety and stuff. Van Til would have said essentially like about the the LGBTQ thing and all this thing where they want to try to pervert little children in school by bringing in drag queens and stuff. I don't know. That's just wrong. But at any rate, I don't think he would have said, well, let's just discuss whether or not it's valid or not to have that kind of activities in the school. Boom, boom, boom. I think he would have said, the Lord has spoken. He is jealous over his children. If you try to harm them, he will destroy you. He has sworn on his honor to defend his children. And this means little baby girls and boys, too. They're his children. You don't cross him up on that, you're going to lose. That's refreshing. It just cuts out all the mumbo jumbo about whether their whole viewpoint is even valid. Who cares whether it's valid? The thing is, it's condemned. The Almighty has already vetoed that sucker, and it's going right back where it came from the nobody downstairs. And with rejected. You don't want to be rejected by the king. But you can't be accepted on your own terms. He accepts you on his terms, and that changes everything. He comes in and comes meddling in your life and gives you eyes to see where you never did. He gives you hungers for things you never were hungry for. He gives you new priorities. I mean, he's just about the best there ever could be. I can't see how anyone could ever top him. It's theoretically impossible, because after all, he's the guy that invented. He's the one who gives life to all spirits. He's the one who gives life to all creatures. And so, I mean, this guy's at the top of the top of the top of the top of the class. And I'm speaking of Jesus here. And what people really need is they need to have an interaction with him. But let's face it, they're probably not going to run into him down at the grocery store. I walked all over Albertsons. I didn't see Jesus. Guess what? I was supposed to be Jesus in that place for those people. I mean, I can smile a smile. I can say things. Hey, how you doing today? God bless you. Have a good day. In other words, we're all looking around us. Where's the righteous people? Where's our saviors? Where's the cavalry coming to save us? That's you. You're the one who shines the light in your world. for your part, your section of the area. That you're shining in your section of the parking lot, okay? It's a big parking lot. Got a lot of lights. But the big, bright lights, well, good for them. Thank God for them, too. But your light is just as important. And in fact, to people that you meet day by day, it's way more important because you can deliver, from the heart and through the eyes and with your voice, you can deliver a voice that says, you know what? I do care about you because you matter. It doesn't even matter whether you think you matter. You're not in a position to make that decision. You've been valued by another, and he loves for reasons that we are unable to grasp because they're so high and excellent and wonderful. Not that they're irrational or anything. So anyway, I hope Hannah Rose that does something for you there a little bit. But it just seemed funny to me that I thought, well, I've never actually laid down my whole testimony. It just comes out dribs and drabs in conversations, where this would be appropriate or where that might fit, or here's an interesting memory, something like that. But it always comes out little pieces, meals. But the short version is, I yelled out in my despair. I believe he heard me. What happened next, he reached into my body and turned something. It felt like someone turned a valve right here under my solar plexus or something. I was shocked. I thought I was losing my mind. And I found it rather depressing. But within just a few days, when I started sampling, reading the Bible, and that thing started making sense, that blew my mind. And it took me even years to realize later, oh, the reason I can understand this now, he changed me. I wasn't even aware of it. I just thought at the time, well, that's freaky. What a weird coincidence, or something like that. And when he reaches into your heart, he expresses this covenant love. The covenant is not between some abstracted committee called humanity and the Almighty up there kind of floating in orbit. The covenant is not, if you do what I say, I'll let you live. And the people down here on Arcade going, okay, we are up for it. No, the covenant is between the Father and the Son. And what happens is between those two, they cut covenant. The picture of it is in Genesis. Abraham, go part the animals. He gets this big animal knife out, cut the animal, boom, boom. And the smoking pot and the thing go through the pieces. Abraham's over here snoozing, well, almost asleep. And he sees some of this, but he's not participating. He's just watching what's happening. The covenant was cut in Abraham's sight. And the short version is this. God was pledging himself through the smoking thing and the incense or whatever it was, the two items that went through the pieces together. What that meant was that the two kings used to link arms with each other, and they'd walk through the pieces, swearing covenant oath upon themselves. Brother king, should I ever break faith with you, then let this, what has happened to these animals, fall upon me. They're swearing a curse upon themselves should they ever break faith with each other. And that's the way you did politics back then. Well, Abraham would have understood that. We don't. But the point is that the Father was declaring the covenant truth, and the covenant truth is this. It's not so surprising, really, is it, that God would uphold his side of the covenant? I mean, come on. He's perfect. He's almighty. I mean, what big wow, what? But the weird part is that there was two that went through. He's saying that he's going to keep his side of the covenant. Okay, I'll buy that. He's saying that he's going to keep man's side of the covenant too. What? That's impossible. For him to do that, he would have to become a man. He would have to become a man now, wouldn't he? And keeping covenant with the Father, he becomes the new Adam, the head of the new race. He bestows life upon those who've been given to him by the Father. He calls and they hear and respond. His sheep hear his voice and follow him. He says so, and I believe it. It's part of my life. And so I just want to say, if you're talking to an unbeliever, the advice that you get lots of times is, don't bombard them with so much theology, but just love. They say love on. I always hate that when people say that. Stop saying that. Love on them. Ugh, stop. But in other words, display kindness. Be compassionate. Be patient with others. That's good advice. But it has to be also tinged with humility. You know, I could have blown up at you. I could have yelled at you because of what you did or whatever. And in my old self, I would have. I really would have. But God bless you, man. Something's changed. And He's in me. And so I'm going to bless you when I really should have cursed you. And in a way, I still want to, but I'm not going to. But in other words, make that part of your confession. Yes, go ahead and love. Show compassion to those around you. But also give them a clue once in a while. It's not because I'm so warm and fuzzy as all that I couldn't possibly hold a grudge. No, I'm not that nice. Not even close. The reason I love you is because I've been loved by another. I thought I was completely unlovable myself. I mean, that was essentially, that was part of my big problem. I was suicidal during those early years. And even for many years as a Christian, I fought off suicide 100 times. And with the Lord's Spirit, I beat it. But that's part of my testimony as well. But that's a kind of a separate story, and I can do that another time. But in other words, the point is that when you're doing your Christian evangelism, yes, you can cite the word. Of course, go ahead. The problem is they can't hear it. So try to translate it into English that they could hear. Might help. But the point is that as you're doing kindness, as you're being humble, as you're being patient with others and showing forbearance and, you know, all the biblical stuff that you just read it, man. The apostles are all about this stuff. And, I mean, they insisted on it, and rightly so. I mean, I'm not saying that there's something wrong with their doctrine. That's nuts. But what I mean is that in there it needs to be couched and made clear. The reason, and, you know, people say occasionally, you're just, you know, you're just way too nice. You know, I would have punched him in the face, you know, whatever, as a kind of a commentary. And it's like, it's not all me. I understand. I mean, I'm the guy that came up with the repartee about, you know, using a shotgun instead of turning the other cheek. And I believed I was right. Vengeance is real and it needs to happen. But what happens in faith is that we are able to turn it over. It's not like I quit having ideas about revenge. No. In fact, if anything, they got a little bigger. But what happened is I turn it all over to Yahweh. Revenge is His thing. He runs that franchise. He runs that option. He runs it perfectly, and He alone runs it. So I do not take vengeance. However, I recognize when vengeance should be taken, and I can issue warnings. Don't cross up God. He judges justly. And He has no wiggle room for liars. None. So be blessed, I hope. And I'd like to hear something about your testimony too. And also, I'd just like to say I thank you for these ideas, you know, ideas to talk about. And if you have other ideas, or if you can think of things that, you know, what about this, what about that? You know, I like to have a conversation because, you know, if you don't actually interact with other people, you can have as many ideas as you want. But frankly, if nobody hears them, first of all, you can't even tell if they're real half the time. But secondly, if they're good, if they're wholesome, then you're keeping all that to yourself? Nah, you need to spread it around. It didn't cost you nothing. You should spread the wealth that you have. Has He given you a gift? Do you know how to do things? Or do you know how to deal with people or whatever it is? Then and do those things, exercise your gifts in a sense of thankfulness. And it's like, hey, this is participation. I get to participate in a covenant act like Abraham did. I get to kind of be there to see it happen and to participate with my words and my deeds and my prayers. So be more like Jesus. Be more like Him because He's exactly like the Father. And that's the best. The best of the best of the best. Have a good evening, and I'd like to hear some more from you if you'd like to. God bless you.